The day had started like any other. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and the small community ground was full of people preparing for the yearly sports gathering. It wasn't a big event, but for many people in the neighborhood, it was something they looked forward to. There were friendly matches, games, food stalls, and a lot of noise. Everyone came there to enjoy and forget their worries for a while. Among all the people moving around, he walked quietly through the crowd. He wasn't the type who talked much or tried to get attention. Most people knew him as the calm guy who always helped when someone needed a hand, but never involved himself in any conflict. He liked peace, preferred silence, and usually stayed on the sidelines during events like this. But today, something unexpected was about to happen. As he passed a group of people gathered near the practice area, he noticed a little argument happening. At first, he didn't think much of it. Arguments were normal in competitive events. Someone always claimed a foul, someone always got upset. But when he heard his own name being called out, he stopped and turned. Standing at the center of the group was a girl known across the community for her fierce personality. She wasn't rude, just extremely competitive. She hated losing, and more than that, she hated being disrespected. People admired her confidence, but they also knew to stay careful around her. If someone challenged her, she would never back down. If someone even seemed to look down on her, she reacted instantly. She stood tall, hands on her waist, eyes sharp. The crowd had already formed a circle around her, waiting to see what she would do next. And in the middle of that circle, everyone was staring at him. He felt confused. He had only walked by the group a few seconds ago. How could he be involved in anything? He stepped forward slowly and asked someone nearby what happened. A boy pointed toward the girl and said she thought he had ignored her call earlier and walked away like she was nothing. He blinked a few times, surprised. He barely even heard anything in the noise of the event. And he surely didn't mean to ignore anyone. But before he could explain, the girl stepped closer, her expression intense. "You think you can just walk off like that?" she asked loudly. Her voice wasn't filled with anger as much as pride. She didn't like the idea of someone dismissing her skill or her presence. The crowd stayed silent, waiting for his answer. He felt uncomfortable with so many eyes on him. He wasn't used to attention, especially not this kind. He raised his hand slightly, trying to calm the situation. "I didn't hear you," he said gently. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you." Some people in the crowd nodded, believing him. Others looked at the girl to see how she would react. But she wasn't satisfied. To her, it didn't matter whether it was intentional or not. All she saw was someone turning his back on her challenge, and in her world, that was enough. "Fine," she said. "If you didn't hear me now." She pointed toward the practice mat where people usually held friendly sparring matches. "I challenge you. Right here." A few people gasped. Some laughed. Others whispered excitedly. A challenge from her was serious, even if it was meant to be friendly. She trained regularly, she competed often, and she was proud of her skills. And she never not even once lost without a fight. He stood still for several seconds, unsure of what to say. He wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't afraid of losing either. But he didn't want to fight. Not because he doubted himself, but because he had promised something long ago. He had promised he wouldn't get into unnecessary competitions again, not after what happened years before. It wasn't a story he shared with anyone. Only a few people close to him knew about it. Even then, he avoided any situation that could bring it back. But now, with the crowd waiting and the girl staring at him like he had personally insulted her family, he felt trapped between what he wanted and what the moment demanded. "I don't want to fight," he said quietly. His refusal only added fuel to the fire. People looked at him with surprise, and the girl took a step forward, misunderstanding his reason. "So you think you're too good for this?" she said, her tone sharper. "No, that's not what I meant," he tried to explain. But the words didn't matter anymore. Once she felt challenged, her pride pushed her ahead of her logic. "If you won't step forward, then you're admitting you walked away because you thought I wasn't worth your time." He sighed. It wasn't true at all. He respected everyone. That was just his nature. But the situation was getting worse, and he knew if he didn't respond, the misunderstanding would only grow. The crowd would believe he looked down on her. She would carry this anger longer than needed, and the entire event would turn sour. He didn't like conflict, but he also didn't like hurting someone unintentionally. If accepting the challenge would calm the situation, maybe it was worth it. He could keep it controlled, gentle, and respectful. No need for anything aggressive. He nodded slowly. "If it will clear the misunderstanding, I'll accept." The crowd murmured with excitement. Some clapped. A few whistled. The girl gave a small smirk, almost satisfied. They moved toward the practice area, while people followed, forming a half circle around the mat. He took off his jacket as he stepped onto the mat, trying to mentally prepare himself. He didn't want this, but he would handle it with respect. He rolled up his sleeve calmly, not thinking too much about it. But the moment the fabric moved, revealing the ink on his arm, everything changed. The tattoo was simple but powerful. It wasn't flashy or stylish. It wasn't something he got for decoration. It was a symbol, a mark from a time he didn't talk about. A time that had shaped him deeply. The symbol carried memories of someone he once trained with, someone he respected, someone who changed his life. It was a reminder of the discipline he learned and the promise he made. The girl's confident expression suddenly disappeared. Her eyes widened, her posture stiffened, and for the first time since the confrontation started, she looked unsure. She stared at the tattoo as if it had pulled her backward through time. She took a small step back, completely forgetting her stance. The crowd didn't understand what happened. They looked at her, then at him, then back at her again. But she didn't react to them. She only stared at the symbol on his arm. That her reaction surprised him. He followed her gaze and looked down at his own tattoo. He hadn't thought about how people would react to it. He kept it mostly covered, not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't want it to start conversations he wasn't ready for. But this girl, she recognized it instantly. She opened her mouth slightly, but no words came out. Her eyes softened, confusion and shock mixing together. It felt like the entire ground grew quiet, even though people were still talking in the background. For a moment, neither of them moved. She wasn't the fierce girl anymore, and he wasn't the quiet guy forced into a fight. They were just two people standing across from each other, connected by something the crowd couldn't see. And without saying anything, both of them froze. That was the moment everything changed, even before either of them understood why. The moment the tattoo became visible, the whole energy around the practice mat shifted. At first, only the girl noticed it, but soon the people closest to him leaned in, trying to understand why she suddenly froze. A few whispered among themselves, confused about her reaction. She had been so fierce a minute ago, ready to challenge him in front of everyone, and now she stood still, as if the ground had stopped moving beneath her feet. He wasn't sure what to do. He looked at her carefully, wondering if she was feeling unwell. But her eyes weren't on him. They were locked on the ink on his arm. It wasn't a big tattoo, but the symbol had weight. It carried memories, experiences, and a promise he had kept hidden from most people. He felt the air grow heavy. Even though 50 people were standing around the mat, the only thing he could hear was his own heartbeat. He didn't like attention. He wasn't used to so many eyes on him. But now, the attention wasn't on him, it was on the tattoo, on the story behind it, a story he never expected to surface in a place like this. The girl finally blinked. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't confident either. It was something new, something almost vulnerable. She took a slow breath and stepped forward slightly, but her voice came out softer than before. Where did you get that?" she asked. Her tone surprised him. A few people in the crowd leaned in, sensing something serious was unfolding. They didn't know what the symbol meant, but they could feel that it meant something important to her. He lowered his arm a little, covering the tattoo instinctively. Not to hide it, but because he never liked putting his past on display. The tattoo was personal. It wasn't something he bragged about or used to show off. It was something he had gotten after years of training, guidance, and a painful goodbye. Every line of that symbol meant something to him. He looked down, then up at her again. "It's from someone I used to train with," he said slowly. "A long time ago." The girl swallowed hard. Her eyes softened, and she took another step closer, but still kept a respectful distance. She didn't look like someone who wanted to fight anymore. She looked like someone trying to confirm a truth that she wasn't prepared to face. "Who taught you?" she asked quietly. He felt a small ache in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Even hearing someone ask about that part of his life brought emotions he had buried deep. The memory wasn't painful because of the training. The training was the best part. It was painful because of why it ended. He breathed out slowly. "An older coach," he said. "Someone who guided me when I needed it the most. He taught discipline and how to stay calm." The girl closed her eyes for a second, as if she was fighting back a memory of her own. When she opened them again, her voice trembled a little, something no one had ever seen from her before. "My brother. He had the same tattoo." The crowd went silent again. Even people who didn't understand the meaning understood that something important had been revealed. He looked at her closely. He could see her hands tighten slightly, as if she was holding on to something inside her. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a softness that showed she wasn't as tough as everyone believed. "I've never seen anyone else with it," she continued. "Only him." He didn't know what to say. The connection was unexpected, and the memories it brought back were strong. He remembered the long hours of training, the early mornings, the discipline, and the handful of people who trained under that coach. It wasn't a big group. It was small, close, built on trust and respect. He remembered a young boy who used to come sometimes, watching from the side. The boy didn't talk much, but his eyes were full of curiosity. The coach often said the boy reminded him of someone who would grow strong one day, if he chose the right path. Could that boy be the girl's brother? He took a slow breath. "Your brother? Did he train under the same coach?" he asked gently. The girl nodded. She didn't hide her emotions, not now. Her strong expression softened. "Yes, he trained there for years." He admired the coach more than anyone. He wanted to get the tattoo one day, but he got it earlier than planned. The coach gave him permission because he said he had earned it. He understood now why she reacted the way she did. The tattoo wasn't just a mark for her brother. It was a mark of dedication, discipline, and someone she deeply respected. Seeing the same symbol on a stranger's arm must have felt like meeting a part of her brother's past. She looked at him again, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "When I saw it on you, I didn't know what to think. I never expected to see it again." He nodded slowly, understanding more with each word. He gently lowered his arm, not hiding the tattoo anymore. "Your brother trained with us," he said quietly. "He was one of the best. He had a strong spirit." Her eyes shone with a mix of pride and sadness. "He talked a lot about his group," she said. "He said he learned everything there, even confidence, even how to stay calm." She let out a small breath. Sometimes he even copied the way people trained. I used to watch him and laugh. He was so passionate about it. The crowd around them didn't fully understand the story, but they could feel the emotion. The tension from earlier had disappeared. Now there was only a silent weight in the air, a sense of something real and human. She stepped back a little, her voice steady but softer than he had ever heard. "I thought you were someone just trying to avoid me. I didn't know." He shook his head gently. "I wasn't avoiding you. I just don't like fights anymore." She looked down, then nodded. "My brother told me once. He said people who trained under that coach never fought for ego. They avoided useless fights. Only those who didn't understand that thought it meant they were weak." He smiled faintly, remembering those words. The coach used to say it often. "Strength isn't proven by how many fights you win," he would say. "Strength is proven by how many fights you choose not to start." The girl let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but filled with emotion. "I think I forgot that today," she admitted. I reacted without thinking. He didn't blame her. Anyone would have assumed the same in her place. Misunderstandings were normal in a crowded, noisy event. The important thing was that now the truth was out. Around them, the crowd slowly relaxed. Some people whispered to each other. Some stepped back, not wanting to interrupt something that clearly wasn't about competition anymore. A few even smiled softly, realizing that what was happening was much more meaningful than a simple challenge. Neither of them moved toward the mat anymore. The idea of sparring felt unnecessary. It felt almost disrespectful now, considering the connection they had just discovered. She looked at the mat, then back at him. "I don't want to fight you anymore," she said quietly. He nodded. "I didn't want to fight you in the first place." A light breeze passed through the ground, moving the dust slightly. It felt like the tension was fading with the wind, leaving the area lighter, calmer. The girl looked at his tattoo again, but this time her expression wasn't shocked. It was gentle. "My brother would have respected you," she said softly. He felt something warm in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. "I respected him too," he replied. "More than he ever knew." Their eyes met, not with challenge or pride, but with mutual understanding. In a place filled with noise, cheers, and competitive energy, the two of them found a moment of memory, connection, and shared history. Nothing dramatic happened. No fight, no loud announcement, no crowd cheering. Just two people standing on a practice mat, realizing the world was smaller than they thought. And for both of them, that moment was far more powerful than any duel. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The wind moved lightly across the ground, carrying the faint noise of people talking in the distance. But near the practice mat, everything felt quieter, calmer, almost as if time had slowed down for them. The girl stood there, her hands slightly trembling, though she tried hard not to show it. She had always been known as the strong one, the one who never backed down, the one who always held her ground. People admired her confidence, even feared it a little. But now, in front of him, she looked very different. Not weak, not defeated, just honest, and unexpectedly vulnerable. He noticed the change in her posture. Her shoulders, once stiff and squared, had relaxed. Her eyes, which moments ago held fire, now carried a softness that made her seem like someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't afraid to show that she, too, carried memories she wasn't prepared to face. He didn't rush her. He didn't ask questions. He just stood there quietly, giving her space to process the moment. After a few seconds, she finally let out a quiet breath, almost like she had been holding it since the moment she saw the tattoo. She looked at him and tried to speak, but her voice cracked slightly. She cleared her throat and tried again. "He never talked about everything he learned," she said softly, "but he talked about the people, the ones who pushed him, The ones who trained with him. The ones he respected. He listened closely. There was something in her voice that made him feel like she wasn't just talking about her brother. She was remembering him. He used to come home with bruises. She continued, her voice steadier now. I would ask him why he put himself through all that. And he would smile. That stubborn smile of his. And say he wanted to be strong enough to protect the people he cared about. A faint smile appeared on the boy's face. He remembered that smile. He had seen it after long training sessions, when everyone was exhausted but still proud of their progress. That boy, her brother, had always trained harder than anyone else. He had a big heart, he replied quietly. He wasn't the strongest in the beginning, but he was the most determined. The coach always said that effort mattered more than anything. She nodded slowly, her eyes drifting toward the ground. I know, she whispered. He told me the same thing. For a moment, she seemed lost in memory. The crowd around them had mostly drifted away, sensing that the scene wasn't meant for entertainment. Only a few people stayed, respectfully keeping distance. Their faces carried curiosity, but also understanding. He waited, giving her time. It was clear that seeing the tattoo had stirred something deep inside her. It wasn't just recognition, it was an emotional connection to someone she missed. When she looked back up, her eyes were slightly glossy, but she held herself steady. Can I ask you something? She said. He nodded gently. Of course. She hesitated, then asked, Why did you stop training? The question hit him softly, like a memory brushing against an old scar. He lowered his eyes for a second, thinking carefully before answering. It wasn't the training, he said slowly. I loved it. It made me feel strong, grounded, focused. He paused for another breath. But something happened that made me step back. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. She watched him closely. She didn't interrupt or rush him. She could sense this wasn't easy for him to talk about. He continued gently, our coach. He got sick. He was the one who held us together. He taught us more than moves or techniques. He taught us discipline, patience, respect. He treated us like family. His voice softened. When he couldn't continue, the group slowly fell apart. People moved away. Some lost interest. Some didn't know how to continue without him. She listened carefully, her eyes steady and understanding. I stayed for a while, he said. But training without him didn't feel the same. It felt empty. And after a point, I didn't want to fight anymore. Not in competitions. Not even in friendly matches. She nodded, absorbing every word. It wasn't weakness. It was grief mixed with respect. Anyone who had lost a mentor, a guide, or someone they admired would understand that feeling. That's why I avoid challenges now, he said. Not because I'm afraid, just because I don't want to turn something meaningful into something shallow. The girl took a deep, steady breath. His honesty touched her more than she expected. She had come here ready to prove herself, ready to win, ready to defend her pride. But now, in front of him, she felt that maybe she had misunderstood what real strength looked like. My brother said the same thing once, she murmured. He said real battles aren't on mats or in competitions. They're in your mind, your heart, and in the choices you make. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and she quickly looked away to hide it. But he noticed. He wasn't someone who ignored people's emotions. Quietly, he stepped closer, not too close, just enough to show understanding. He was right, he said softly. She swallowed, trying to keep control of her feelings. He respected you, she said suddenly, even though he never mentioned your name. He respected the people he trained with. He felt something warm spread through his chest. And we respected him, he replied. He had something many people don't have heart. Her breathing steadied. She wiped the corner of her eye quickly, pretending she wasn't emotional, but she didn't need to pretend. He had already seen the truth. For the first time since the confrontation started, a small, real smile touched her lips. Not the confident smirk she usually carried, not the tough expression people admired, but a genuine, gentle smile that made her look younger, softer, and far more human. "I'm glad you accepted the challenge," she said lightly, almost teasing, but with sincerity. "Even though we didn't actually fight." He smiled too, shaking his head. "I accepted because I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you." "Well," she said, looking at him with a hint of amusement, "I definitely don't think that now." They both laughed softly, not loudly, but enough to break the remaining tension. People around them began returning to their activities now that the scene had calmed. Some glanced at them, curious but respectful. Others smiled, sensing that something meaningful had happened, even if they didn't know the details. The girl looked at the practice mats again, then at him. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "my brother always said the people from his training group were the strongest he ever met. Not because of their techniques, but because of their mind." He nodded. "The coach taught us that. Strength starts inside." She tilted her head slightly. "Would you, maybe, tell me more about him? About the coach? About how you all trained?" He hesitated only for a second, not because he didn't want to, but because talking about the past always felt heavy. But looking at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, he felt something shift. Maybe sharing those memories would help both of them. Maybe it was time to bring those stories back to life instead of keeping them locked away. "I can tell you," he said gently, "if you really want to know." She nodded quickly, almost like a child who had been offered a story she had been waiting her whole life to hear. "I do. I really do." They walked away from the mat and found a quieter spot near the edge of the ground, sitting on a low concrete border. People walked by, laughing and chatting, but their world felt separate, small, calm, and full of memories. He began sharing small stories, nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. Just simple things. How the coach insisted everyone arrive early. How he corrected their posture gently but firmly. How he taught them to breathe before reacting. How he believed that strength without kindness meant nothing. The girl listened with full attention, absorbing every detail. Some stories made her smile. Some made her eyes shine with emotions she tried not to show. Every time he mentioned something her brother used to talk about, she nodded, almost whispering. He said that too. With each story, the distance between them shrank. They weren't strangers anymore. They weren't competitors. They weren't two people caught in a misunderstanding. They were two people connected by someone who had shaped both of their lives in different ways. At one point, she said softly, "I wish I had met him." He looked at her with a gentle expression. "In a way," he said quietly, "you did. Through your brother." She smiled again, her eyes warm. "Maybe you're right." The sun began to lower slowly, casting a soft golden light over the ground. People started packing up, children ran around, and the smell of snacks filled the air. But for them, the world felt peaceful. No duel. No conflict. No anger. Just understanding. Just memory. Just connection. And maybe the beginning of something new. When the child called him Father, the entire royal hall fell into a silence so deep that even the soft hum of the floating lanterns sounded loud. He didn't understand what had just happened. One moment he was standing there, hoping he hadn't broken any royal rule. And the next moment, the small alien child, wide-eyed, nervous, and clutching the queen's robe, looked straight at him and said that single word that froze an entire kingdom. He tried to tell himself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the child had used the wrong word. Maybe it meant something else in their language. But the way the queen's expression softened, and the way the council members stared at him like he had just rewritten the laws of their world told him this was not an accident. The queen stepped forward, her movements slow and steady. Her armor made a soft sound with each step, but her voice remained calm. "She chose you," she said quietly. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't anyone special, just a visitor who had helped the queen and the child a few days earlier. He had not expected anything like this. He had only done what he thought was right. The queen could see the confusion on his face. "Among my people," she explained, "a child speaks that word only when they feel completely safe with someone. It is not about blood. It is about trust." He felt his stomach tighten. The child, who had been hiding behind the queen since the moment they arrived, peeked at him again, her small antennae flicking shyly. She wasn't scared. Not of him. She actually smiled. He managed to smile back, though his heart was racing. He didn't want to disappoint her, but he also didn't know how to handle something this big. The queen gently guided the child forward, letting her take slow steps toward him. The hall stayed absolutely silent. Even the guards didn't shift. When the child reached him, she lifted her small hand and touched his sleeve like she was checking if he was real. Her fingers were barely the size of a button, cool and light. He knelt down slowly so he wouldn't tower over her, and she looked relieved when he did. She leaned closer, placing her head lightly against his chest for just a moment. It was such a simple thing, but he felt something inside him soften in a way he wasn't prepared for. The queen watched this with a mix of surprise and understanding. "I knew she liked you," she said quietly, "but I didn't know she would choose this." He swallowed, unsure how to answer. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "You protected her," the queen said. "Not because you had to, but because you wanted to." She has never forgotten. He remembered that moment clearly, the day he first met them. He had stepped in without thinking, simply because the child looked frightened and alone. He didn't know who she was then. He didn't know she belonged to royalty. He didn't even know about their customs. He had just seen a child who needed help. The queen raised her hand slightly, signaling the council to relax. The tension in the room slowly faded, though the surprise remained on every face. She turned toward him again. "I will not force you," she said. "Our traditions are sacred, but they also allow freedom. If you accept this connection, you will become part of her life, part of our lives." He looked at the child again. She was still watching him, her eyes bright and hopeful. She didn't say another word, as if she had already said the one she needed to. He took a slow breath. "If this is truly her choice, then I won't step away from her." The child's face lit up. She didn't jump or shout her species, didn't express excitement that way, but her small antennae rose. And she wrapped her hand around his finger like she had just won something precious. The queen bowed her head slightly, a gesture of gratitude and respect. "Then we welcome you," she said. After that moment, everything changed. The council members approached him one by one, each offering formal words he barely understood. Their tone was no longer tense. Some sounded curious, others hopeful, and a few even looked relieved. The guards also shifted their stance, no longer watching him with suspicion. Through all this, the child stayed close to him. She didn't hold on to him too tightly. She simply walked beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every few steps, she glanced up at him just to make sure he was still there. He couldn't help smiling each time she did. The queen guided them to a quieter chamber, far away from the official hall. There, the atmosphere was calmer, warmer. Instead of high ceilings and echoing floors, the room had soft lights and gentle colors. It looked more like a family space than a royal room. The queen invited him to sit, and the child sat beside him, leaning lightly against his arm. He didn't pull away. He didn't want her to think he was uncomfortable. The queen sat across from them and spoke gently. "She has struggled to trust others," she said. "She has lost people before. When she met you, something changed." He felt a quiet heaviness in his chest, not of sadness, but of responsibility. "I don't know what I can offer," he admitted. "I'm not from your world. I don't know your traditions." "You don't need to be perfect," the queen replied. "You only need to be sincere. She chose you because she felt kindness in you. That is more important than anything else." The child turned toward him and made a soft sound. He had learned that it meant agreement. She placed her small hand on his, not fully holding it, just touching it gently. It was enough. The queen smiled softly at the sight. "She does not open her heart easily," she said. "Today is rare." He nodded, feeling the weight of those words. He wasn't sure how he had earned that level of trust, but he knew he couldn't let her down. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. The queen seemed genuinely grateful. That is all she needs. After spending some time together, the queen stood and approached them. "There is one more thing," she said. "If you are comfortable, she wishes to show you something important." The child stood too, tugging gently at his sleeve. She looked eager but careful, as if she didn't want to push him. He gave a small nod, and she led them through a side door into a dimly lit corridor. The path eventually opened into a small garden. Soft glowing plants lined the ground, and a warm breeze moved through the leaves. The child walked toward a stone structure in the center, a simple circular fountain filled with shimmering water. She pointed at the water, and then at him, urging him to kneel beside her. When he did, she placed her hand on the surface. The water reacted instantly, glowing brighter. Then she gently guided his hand toward the water god. When his fingertips touched the surface, the glow expanded, wrapping softly around both their hands. The queen stood behind them, watching silently. "This is a bond pool," she explained gently. "Our children use it to share their feelings with those they trust. She is offering this to you." He froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the sincerity of it. The child looked nervous, waiting for his reaction. He met her eyes, then slowly nodded. "Okay," he said softly. "I trust you." She pressed her hand more firmly into the water, and he did the same. The glow brightened, gentle and warm. It didn't show images or memories. It simply shared an emotion. He felt something like quiet comfort, gratitude, and a deep sense of safety. It was her way of telling him she felt at peace with him. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. Not out of sadness, but because the feeling was so pure, so honest. He had never expected to experience something like this. When the glow faded, the child leaned against him again, resting her head on his shoulder. The queen approached them with soft steps. "She has accepted you fully," she said. "And now, our world will accept you too." He took a steady breath, gently placing his hand on the child's back so she wouldn't feel alone. The garden around them seemed calmer, the air warmer, the moment deeper than anything he could have imagined. He didn't know exactly what the future would look like. He didn't know what challenges would come next. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just a visitor in their world. He was part of something now, and the small child beside him, who had chosen him with a single word, had given him a place he never knew he needed.